Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. We have an extra amazing show today because Krystal is back. So, Krystal, what do we have in the show?
Nice to be back. I truly did miss you all. Hope you had a great week here without me. I'm sure that you did. Ryan Grimm always holds down the fort very well. Great show for you this morning. We've got Madison Cawthorn on. He is the 24-year-old who kind of stunned everyone in North Carolina. He beat a Trump-backed and Mark Meadows-backed candidate. Like, it wasn't even close. He overwhelmingly beat them. Yeah. So we're excited to talk to him. We also have Jeffrey Stein on. Of course, he's a great friend of the show, also a great reporter for the Washington Post. He's going to talk about whether or not there will be a coronavirus economic response part 2 or 3 or whatever we're on, if that is even going to happen. But we wanted to start with some good old-fashioned bipartisanship here in D.C.
That's right. We love to report on how when people just cross the aisle in order to get us into more war in Afghanistan. Talked a lot about the story last week. Let's throw this up there on the screen. The House panel for the Defense Armed Services Committee basically voted to constrain an Afghan drawdown, asking for an assessment on, quote, incentives in order to attack U.S. troops. Of course, we covered that intelligence kind of brouhaha last week. But this is the perfect example of bipartisanship, where you have a commander-in-chief who wants to draw down troops in Afghanistan, remove 4,000 troops from Afghanistan, in a bid to sign a peace deal with the Taliban. And there's a bipartisan coalition in Congress to say, whoa, 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 whoa. No, they're basically trying to constrain it so that it is U.S. policy as codified in the NDAA, which is the appropriations bill for the military, that says you have to keep U.S. troop levels at a certain point in Afghanistan. And they were like, you can't pull them out unless they meet certain conditions, like the Afghans can totally fend for themselves. I'm like, oh, well, we haven't been able to meet that condition for like 18 years.
Yes.
With several $100 billion or over $1 trillion now at this point. So I'm sure that we're going to hit that benchmark real soon. It's madness. And of course, Liz Cheney teams up with another, neocon pro-war Democrat in order to make this all go down. And she's winning plaudits from the Jennifer Rubin caucus over at the Washington Post.
Yes.
Nobody ever faces...
resistance heroes all around.
That's what bothers me. Nobody ever faces any criticism or cost for beating the war drum and having bloodthirst in Afghanistan. It's just incredible to watch this. And they're being lauded for
that matter.
Everybody's clapping it. They're like, oh, wow, look at them stand up to President Trump so more American troops can die in Afghanistan. It's insane.
It is completely insane. And it's overwhelming. I mean, it was not close. I'm glad to see a few dissenters, right? You see the Ro Khannas of the world. You see Mike Lee. You see a few people trying to come together in favor of our troops and drawing down. And what the American people, by the way, have voted for in election after election after election. And yet in this town, it never gets through. And it is outrageous. And I mean, it's so telling the areas where Republicans are willing to buck.
Yes.
The president, right? It's always on these issues where they have to serve their corporate masters, they have to serve the military-industrial complex, rather than what the American people actually want. And look, let's not give Trump too much grace. He's not trying to take out all the troops. 4,000 troops, that's what we're talking about. But that's an improvement, right? That's an improvement. And this is where you're going to really make your stand and put up your fierce resistance. By the way, while handing him, massive military budgets, record-breaking military budgets. Democrats seem to have no trouble with that in this era. And I think you make a really good point, which is that this type of bipartisanship, it's always celebrated. Well done. Great crossing the aisle. Way to stand up to the bad orange man. The type of bipartisanship that, Ro Khanna and Mike Lee or Matt Gaetz, the type that they engage in, that's the type that we have to be careful about. Oh, do they have the wrong views? Are you really allowed to partner with them on this thing? So I think your point is really well taken. It's also, looking beyond this one issue, who are the rising future stars in both the parties? Liz Cheney, who goes along with Donald Trump on basically everything except
the military.
When it comes to trying to get us out of bad wars and engagements overseas, she's seen as some leading light and future leader of the party.
And she gets the press coverage for it. So let's throw the Wall Street Journal wrote this. Representative Liz Cheney, she's the third-ranking Republican. She's a figure poised to help redefine the GOP when Trump is no longer leading it. She doesn't want to redefine it. She wants to define it in the mold of her father, Dick Cheney, which is an expansionary imperial power, I guess, or, in terms of invading Iraq and Afghanistan. Oh, and, the national debt and how that's like the greatest national security threat that we can face. It's fiscal austerity, neoconservatism, and I don't even know what the rest of it is. Just standard issue, free market fundamentalism whenever it comes to tax cuts. I'm sure there'd be the tax boys 4.0 in the Liz Cheney administration. It drives me crazy because, again, you get all of this press coverage. You're like, oh, wow, she's standing up. She's redefining the mantle about what it means to be Republican. This is John McCainism. This is the same nonsense which doomed the party for decades. And nobody faces any scrutiny. While you were gone, this whole Afghan story, the Russia thing happened. And we had a Republican Senator, Ben Sass, who said, quote, I want to see plans from the White House to send Taliban and GRU agents home in body bags. So this is a Republican senator who openly says, I want a plan from the White House to kill Russians on Afghan soil. I'm like, are you crazy? What is wrong with you? You want to ramp up a proxy war in Afghanistan against Russia so we can pour more thousands of troops, billions of dollars, and stay there until perpetuity? Nobody said a word. I think I was the only person in Washington who even called him out on it. It's crazy.
That is unbelievable. That did not come across. I mostly stayed off of social media and tried to avoid basically everything last week. But that is unreal. And also I think about, the Democratic Party has won so many elections and won control of the House, won the presidency with Barack Obama on this message of getting out of war. I mean, you and I think both were sort of politically activated 100%. By opposition to the Iraq war. An entire generation really was. And I really believe, I'm sort of ashamed to say this, but I really thought they meant it, right? I actually thought they meant it. Yeah. But then when it comes to this era, and you see so clearly, first of all, the stupidity of just whatever Donald Trump is for, we're going to be against. We're not going to evaluate, we're not going to think about it, we're not going to think about what voters want, we're not going to think about what they've voted for. We are just whatever he wants, we're going to reflexively oppose it, unless it is something that serves our corporate donors, serves the military-industrial complex. And look, to that point, Liz Cheney's a rising star in the Republican Party and, could very much be part of the taking up the mantle and returning it to its great glory before Donald Trump. On the Democratic side, it's the same deal. Susan Rice rising in the Veep stakes. We've got a report from The Hill about how she is coming up in the rankings. Her stock is rising. It's so interesting to me when I read these pieces, Saagar, and the Hill piece, the Washington Post piece, all the pieces that I've read about, Susan Rice coming up in the rankings. They never talk about her policy.
No,
I noticed that not just with her, with Stacey Abrams, with Kamala Harris, with all of these. They never actually talk about, here's their record, here's what they might bring to the office, here's the perspective they might bring. It's all this either horse race, here's the states they could win, or it's just based on demographics, that there's, there's
she's a
push
black
to have a black woman,
right.
So let's and the policy really, really matters, especially when you're talking about foreign policy. But to that point, Susan Rice was on Meet the Press over the weekend, Andrea Mitchell asking her about the issue that Andrea has here. And again, this is so telling to me, isn't, her record on Rwanda, isn't a record in terms of what she did in the Obama administration, the talking points with regards to Benghazi, which, look, I think that whole thing was blown out of proportion, but she did withdraw from consideration over being Secretary of State over that issue. She did go out and mislead the American people or lie to the American people. What Andrea Mitchell is concerned about is that she doesn't have electoral experience. Let's take a listen to that exchange.
How should Americans feel about voting for someone who's never had any experience in electoral politics, never run in a national campaign?
Well, Andrea, let's not get ahead of ourselves here, right? Joe Biden needs to make the decision as to who he thinks will be his best running mate. And I will do my utmost, drawing on my experience of years in government, years of making the bureaucracy work. I've worked on multiple campaigns, presidential campaigns. I've been on the campaign trail as a surrogate, and I'm going to do everything I can to help get Joe Biden elected and to help him succeed as president, whether I'm his running mate or I'm a door knocker. I don't mind.
No, I think she minds. But like you said,
A little disingenuous
let's
there.
remember who Susan Rice is. This is a person whose career was launched in the National Security Council under Bill Clinton, where she reportedly said, quote, "If we use the word genocide and are seen as doing nothing, what will be the effect on the November election?" That was 1994. And it doesn't get all that much better, right? So we continue to go all the way down the line.
She also did a stint at McKinsey, just so you know, too.
McKinsey, does a nice little, gets in the Obama administration, national security advisor, Benghazi, advocates for war in Libya. Lo and behold, what do we have in front of us? We have a little New York Times tear sheet from from Susan Rice herself. An Afghan bargain likely to fail. After 14 months, the United States would be left without any military or counterterrorism capacity in Afghanistan, effectively subcontracting American security to the Taliban. So you have the person who is running, possibly in the high running in order to be Joe Biden's vice president, if not that Secretary of Defense or the Secretary of State, high level in the National Security Council, who wants to keep troops in Afghanistan forever. And they'll never say it, but that's what that means. Well, if we can't provide safety and security, listen, folks, that's over. It's never going to happen at this point. We pay the Afghans hundreds of billions of dollars a year, and they mostly steal it, and that's the rest of it. And so there's no other choice at this point.
And the justification, and this takes us back to the beginning of what this amendment was about, and the hoops that you have to jump through, right, that are almost impossible to me, that are never going to happen, as you put it. Like, where's the justification for the fact that you're putting our American men and women's lives at risk right now? The money that's being spent, the lives that are being lost, like, that is the thing that needs to be justified every single day. Why did we go to Afghanistan in the first place? We went there to kill Osama bin Laden, which we failed at, by the way, in Afghanistan, eventually, of course, killing him in Pakistan. He's been dead for a long time now. What are we doing there? There is no answer to that question.
No, there's not. 21-year-old kid was just killed in Afghanistan over the weekend, or the July 4th weekend, in a rollover accident. But still, wouldn't have died if it wasn't in Afghanistan.
Where's the justification to him and his family?
They don't care. Again, they could care less. As long as they have it so that 20, 30 troops, elite soldiers die in Afghanistan a year on some sort of raid. It's like at the level where the American public isn't outraged. They can just grift hundreds of billions of dollars a year.
The amount of money that is made, the amount of profiteering that is made in these wars, that's why we have a permanent war. That's it, bottom line.
It really is. Disgusting. But bipartisanship in action. So
alive and well.
All right.
We're going to tell you what's on our radars. That's next.